some documentation to help us with it. But it's a kind of an adaptive learning process, and hopefully maybe some of you have used it before. I'm just going to put up a couple of slides to help me. And what we have, we're going to split the group into 3 roles. And so the 3 roles are, we need a case study speaker, and you might be sweating. I don't know if you can see this. You might be sweating thinking, oh, well, I don't want to do that. That's hard work. But I'll give you the hard sell. To me, that's where you're going to get the most learning from, because what the case study speaker does is that, yeah, you have to share for 5 minutes what you've done, but then also what you're really receiving. Oh, and you can also ask the consultants for particular advice as well. And then you'll have to answer a few questions. And then the rest of the session is you're really listening to the discussion and really receiving advice for free. So here you've got 7 consultants around the table that are actually going to provide you advice. So if you want to put your hand up for a case study speaker, we'll ask for that in a minute. There's a facilitator, or they call it a designated authority. I'll take on that role, and really my role will be just time management and keeping you consultants focused and probing and making sure that we're asking the right questions. And then anyone else who's not the case study speaker is then the consultants. So the pressure's on the consultants, I suppose, in that you're there to provide advice. So, and that's going to really require you to listen intently, to reflect, to ask questions, then actually discuss and provide advice back about how to improve in this area. And you're going to do that for free as well. So that's kind of the process we're proposing. So yeah, that's the process we're proposing. So what I'm just going to ask the group, and so, sorry, this isn't, we know that we're all just at the early stages of this kind of work. So we don't have, the case study speaker doesn't have to produce a polished thing. It might be, you might be saying, okay, I've taken a few steps forward and I either want feedback on how it's going or how I could actually do it better. Or you might even have a particular challenge you want to ask the consultants about. But we're not looking for a polished, we've done all this work and this is where we're at. It's just, sharing your experience so far and putting some of this stuff into practice. So I'll stop that for a minute so I can eyeball you all and I'm going to ask for volunteers for a case study speaker, and you'll get a bit of stretch time to kind of clear your minds and prepare what you're going to talk about as well. So is there any volunteers out there in the world? Don't all rush at once. I will be silent until someone volunteers.
I am happy to, but also happy to hear from others. So I'll put my name out there, but yeah, feel free to.
Do you only want one person?
Well, we can have one person. If there's more than one person who's keen to do it, then we can choose which one we want to do today, and we might have to do it another day. But only one person providing that.
I've got to be honest, I'm feeling a little confused a little bit, but I'm always happy to put my hand up for anything, as you know.
Yeah. So I'm just going to check. Ebony and Cal, you may be about to speak about the same case study. So around sea change, is that right? Am I guessing right for both of you?
Yeah, that was it.
Okay. So I reckon, I don't think we have to choose. The case study is going to be around sea change Portland. Who wants to be the presenter? All right, we're going to go with Kelly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give Kelly some thinking time. And so Kelly, you're going to think about what we've done so far, so what steps we've taken. You may have a particular question or queries or areas of advice you want to ask the consultants about. And that's all really you have to do. But I will time you for 5 minutes. You won't get more than 5 minutes. So what
frame it for me a bit different. So I'm a person in a room and I've got a whole bunch of consultants and I just want to talk about, like, am I selling this? Like, I've done the sea change spiel 100 times. Am I doing the spiel?
No. You're not talking about sea change. You're actually talking about the steps we've done so far about trying to introduce complex evaluation of complex systems thinking into sea change Portland. So
I'm not feeling confident. I've got to be really honest. I don't actually know what to say.
Yeah, if you're not
give me
feeling
an example. Chuck me an example of like what I'm feeling a little bit. Sorry.
That's okay. Do you want to do it?
I'm happy to, but happy
if you could, Ebs, I'm just not feeling like I've got my head around exactly what the action is. Like, I'm going to go off for 5 minutes and I don't know what I'm putting together.
No worries. Yeah. I'm happy to do so, and it might be really handy having you as a consultant, Callan, asking the right questions to tease me out a bit more.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, we'll go with that. And we're just trialing this as a process too. But thank you, Kelly, for volunteering. Thank you, Eb. What we're going to do is we're going to have a 5 minute stretch time. But before we do that, when we come back, this is how the process is going to work. And maybe I should have shown you this first, Kelly. Actually, now I think about it, to give a bit more clarity. So if I can actually get this slide to move, which things don't always like to do when you're sharing. Yeah, now I can. So we're going to have a stretch break. Then what's going to happen after that is Ebony's going to come back and share what they've done, what she's done so far. And also she can ask for advice from the consultants. She's got 5 minutes and I will time that 5 minutes. She may not want to take the whole 5 minutes, that's fine. And there's to be no interruptions during that time. So she's just she gets to talk, say whatever she likes for 5 minutes. Then all of us as consultants get a chance to reflect on what we've heard and ask her questions. And so this is our chance to get all the information we need to be able to provide her any advice. And during that time, think about what's been said, but also what hasn't been said as well. So ask her about those kind of things. Then Ebony turns her mic off and she doesn't get another bit of a say for the next 17 minutes. She actually watches the group. So then as a consultant group, and I'll help facilitate this, that's our opportunity to reflect on what we've heard from Ebony and diagnose what's going on with the case. Kelly, you need to be a consultant in this. You're not to then take on the speaker's role. So I'm just noting, because Kelly will be familiar with this, that you're to take on this consultant role to really kind of reflect on and diagnose what's going on. And then the consultants have another 7 minutes to kind of formulate advice. So saying, okay, well, how could we help Ebony moving forward with this is really what we're trying to do. And then at the end, Ebony gets 3 minutes to actually talk about, well, what does she reflect on through that process, and also on the advice that's given. And hopefully that process will help us kind of really understand the case study, but also learn from each other and give us some guidance that then we may be able to use, all of us be able to use in our work as well. So, and I'll put this back up as we're going through the process. But is there any kind of questions about the process first? Is it kind of clearish? Yeah, we're good. Alrighty then. So step 1, a 5 minute stretch break. And so I will see you all back with your cameras on at 11:12. And Ebony, you can rack your brain while you stretch about what you're going to talk about.
I'll take some notes. All right.
Hey, Eb.
Hey,
Hey.
did you get brought another mid-meeting snack?
Hey, what?
Have you been delivered a mid-meeting snack?
She's gone out to bring the bin in or something. Seriously.
It's not pulling weight.
No. I better save up for lunch.
Yeah. Do you have to leave at 11:30? Was it Pen or?
Yeah, I might leave a couple of seconds beforehand just so I can get logged on. And then that goes through to 12:30. So
Yeah, no worries.
We wanted to get your consultant's advice for free.
yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Have you done this process before, Pen? Is it looking familiar to you?
No.
Yeah, when we were chatting about it earlier in the week, a few of us have done it. No one could find the name for it, so we couldn't Google up anything to help us. Yeah.
No, I don't think I've done it.
I was just asking Anna, Joe, Kelly, does this process look familiar to any of you? Have you used it before? No? Okay. A few of so Joe, Rowe and I have, but like we're going back into our memory banks from 5+ years ago to find it, and we all spoke highly of it, but it was just a tool we hadn't used again. So I'll be interested to see how it goes. So this first step, so we've done the stretch break. So the first step is, and I will be timing, Ebony, that you have up to 5 minutes, and then no one's to ask questions during this period. We'll get a question time, so it's all pressure on Ed to share what you've been doing, and also where if there's particular areas you want the consultants to focus on as well. So over to you, Eb.
All right, thanks. I just noted a few things, so if I'm looking down and not at you, that's why. Try not to talk too fast.
Yeah, I'm going to interrupt first. Sorry, we're going to start again in a minute. I'm just going to give the consultants a little bit of a prompt as well. So for the consultants, this is really the time that it's really about listening actively, and then you'll have that time to reflect and ask questions in a minute. So also I'd be expecting the consultants to be writing stuff down where they're going to ask questions and whatnot too. So you won't be the only one, Ed. And now I'll let your time start now.
Okay, thank you. So Sea Change Portland, I'm not going to go into context about what the project's all about, but just talk about our journey with monitoring and evaluation, particularly since the training late last year. So 4 members of the Sea Change Portland working group actually engaged in the training. So Callie, Jeanette, myself and Craig Keenan, who's also from Portland District Health. After the training in December, the working group came together and sort of shared just a real base level about what we'd learned, like just kind of outlining even just the names of a few tools and saying that we participated in the course with the rest of the working group. And we decided that, yep, we want to move forward with scoping a monitoring and evaluation plan for the project. The first question that we had to answer ourselves when we were thinking about the scope of it was, are we looking retrospective or are we looking forward with our evaluation, and which one's going to be most beneficial? So we asked a few questions around purpose, what success looked like. There was a couple of other things around what capacity we'd need and who'd need to be involved. Should it be retrospective or should it be forward thinking? And the group decided that we're going to be evaluating in the here and now for the purposes of learning and moving forward with those learnings. Then we had a big break over Christmas, and in February we came together. This Sea Change Portland group had an existing theory of change already, but it needed to be adapted to fit within the scope of this MEL journey that we'd set, and also because the focus of the project had shifted or broadened a little bit to include mental health as well. So Sea Change Portland was all about improving healthy eating and physical activity, and now we've broadened that to be wellbeing as a whole. So we needed to firstly adapt our theory of change, not just to fit the scope of the evaluation plan that we'd set, but to include that mental health perspective as well. So we did a bit of toing and froing offline with the ones that had done the training, and then back online with the rest of the working group just to finalise our theory of change and make sure we were capturing everything. So one of the products we have now is a finalised theory of change. We've just then come together as a working group recently to look at that theory of change and bring in a couple of other tools from the course, including the concept cube, to think about which areas or levels of the theory of change we should maybe expect to be seeing shifts in at this stage of the initiative, as to where we can hone in and focus our evaluation a little bit more, because we can't be evaluating everything at the one time because we're a small team and we have limited capacity like everyone does. So we use the concept cube to help with that. In terms of Sea Change Portland is into its maybe almost 7th year of implementation, but we first come to the realization that in the terms of the concept cube and this whole developmental evaluation kind of thinking, we're probably at about year 4 and 5, just because that's where our sort of knowledge is at, and we've learnt a lot since the early days. So we're thinking that we're around year 4 and 5, and we can be expecting to see outcomes in that realm according to that concept cube tool. Yep, so we use the concept cube tool to help pull out certain bits of the theory of change that we wanted to evaluate. And we found that most of them were sitting at the foundations and enabler levels of our theory of change. And there was one part of the systemic changes that we wanted to look at. So mostly lower level and one in the systemic, nothing in the populations or instances of impact just yet. So that's pretty much where we're at now. We've got sort of a bit of interest in our evaluation questions at those different levels, but we're ready to put them into actual evaluation questions. And a few of the challenges, I suppose, will be narrowing that, bringing that in a little bit more due to capacity, because we did say we wanted to know about this, 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 and this. And I think there's also a bit of uncertainty in the group around kind of putting all our eggs and capacity and efforts into one basket, and that maybe posing a risk of not helping us. So a little bit of that, we don't know what we don't know kind of thing, and a little bit of risk taking coming up, I think, to delve into something really deeply, not knowing how much learning it's actually going to provide us. And I think the other risk or piece of advice I'd want to ask would be, I think there's a tendency within the group, and it's just natural at the moment, we're wanting to maybe, well, I know I feel this way, look towards tools before we finalise our evaluation questions, because we want to know that practically we can actually collect the data or the information we need to learn. So I think kind of sticking to the process is a challenge or something that I'd like advice on. Yeah, I think that's probably about it. Am I over my 5 minutes, or if I have time, I'll keep talking?
No, you are spot on, Ebony. You're a dream case presenter. So thank you very, very much for giving all that information. Well done too. It was awesome. So this is our chance now, consultants, is as all of us do, we assume a lot of assumed knowledge when we speak about things. This is your chance to really ask the questions that gives you the most information you need about it. And the other thing I think about with this is, like, you know, bringing in a change to even try and do this evaluation where you're either a single person or a group of people, but you're trying to influence others, you're really trying to influence change. So and changing the system in itself. So think about some of those really key components of changes that Ebony may have not hit on that you may want to ask questions about too. And so some of those things I think about is even, you know, what is, you know, power and the different relationships in the room and those kind of things that also influence how much this kind of work gets embedded and taken up as well. So I'm going to open it to the group to ask questions directly. We've got only 5 minutes for this, and so yeah, ask those kind of fact-based questions so that you understand the story well enough, and I'll open it up.
I've got one. I was just interested to find out, you mentioned that there were 4 people on the group that had participated in the training. What sort of did you do, or what challenges did you face to try and bring the other members of the group on board so that they sort of grasped the value and understood what you were trying to do?
Yeah, so the very first meeting we had, I think when we posed this whole idea of developing a monitoring and evaluation plan, I will actually say that there was a gap, so there was nothing really existing in that space. So I sort of already saw a need and a gap and knew that we were engaging in the training to start off with. But that very first meeting when we came together, we actually went through, I think Jeanette presented back a couple of tools that Clear Horizon had presented to us, particularly from that first, and we actually had, sorry, I'm talking riddles, but a couple of the other working group members that didn't do the training participated in that. Remember we had that level 1 session back in October, I think it was, just where Elise went over the basics before we jumped into level 2. So those working group members had participated in that session, or at least watched the recording, which really helped with that. Yeah, but just making sure that we kept reintroducing the tools and breaking down the jargon and the language along the way was important too.
Thank you, Ebony. Next question.
I'm going to say, how long did it take to generate the theory of change? You did in 2 stages between the 4 of you who had done the course and then taking to the larger group.
Yep. So we were really lucky in that the larger group had actually done a theory of change 12 months ago. So there was something there to start with. And then it was the 4 of us that had done the course that took that previous theory of change away and updated it a little bit according to our new learnings and conversations. I would say that it probably took a total of 2 whole working group meetings to test things out with participants and finalise it. So we were probably together for a total of about 2 hours, I'd say, to do that, as well as the offline work that was happening to get it to where it is now. And we've also identified a bit of a gap in that we feel we need a backing document to our theory of change, just to help people understand it a little bit more and know what we mean by certain language that we're using. So that's in process of being developed too.
Awesome. Thanks, Jo. Ebony. Next question.
Can I just ask a question, if I can remember what it was now? Actually, it might just go off from my head. When you're so I understand how Sea Change works a bit, and how you have the working groups and whatever. Did the working groups feel that focusing on developing the MEL plan took them away from focusing on the operations of Sea Change Portland? Do you know what I mean? Like, I suppose I'm trying to understand their the value, how much value they were putting on it, that they're thinking, all right, is it okay that we're not sitting here talking about all these things that we're doing for Sea Change Portland, we're actually talking about the bigger picture? Was that a challenge for people in the group? Do you know?
If only Callie could jump in at this point in time, because she works a little bit more operationally and would have her own views on that. At the moment, the way that Sea Change works, we don't actually have an operational group meeting. So this is the strategic group that's meeting this process. So that's probably not as much of a concern. And I think maybe the time of year and we have been cautious in still allocating time within our meetings to do our reflections and quick checking on what's happening on the ground as well. So that's been important. But maybe the time of year, that kind of January, February focus meant that not as much was happening in the community anyway, and it didn't take away from that as much as it would have otherwise.
We've got time for one last question.
I'm conscious I need to fly. So if Anna or someone else or Kelly has a question, I'm happy for them to ask. Otherwise, I'll ask mine.
Penny.
Yeah. Sort of a question, when you mentioned around sometimes in your thinking you're wanting to jump to tools rather than stick to the process. Can you just explain that a little bit more, having not had my head in this space a lot, like I have a little bit since we did the training. Is there, I don't necessarily need to know, is there a problem with that? But I don't, they might complement each other as well to make your process more robust. So I'm just wanting to understand that a little bit more when you said that.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if there's a problem with it, and I'm not sure if it's just my personal view or the whole group, but I think a lot of us are pretty action orientated, and just reflecting on that sequence that Elise presented was, you know, scope your plan, come up with your theory of change, come up with your evaluation questions, then come up with your tools, to measure those. And so I think, like, in my head, I've got that as the process and the timeline that we should be following, and just that tendency to make sure we actually have the ease of collecting the information to answer the question and do it well. I mean, not that we're not reporting to anyone on this. That's probably the other really important thing, is that as a working group, we decided in our purpose and our scope that the purpose of this evaluation is for our own internal learning, not for a funder. You know, that might be a secondary purpose. Yep. So I don't think that's a really good question that you've asked, Pen, in terms of how much that actually matters when we're jumping around in the stringent process that we've learnt. But I didn't want to exclude, I don't want us to exclude an evaluation question just because it's hard to measure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
All right, I've got to fly, guys. See ya.
Thank you, Pen, and thank you, Ebony, for those answers as well. 5 minutes doesn't seem enough time to actually ask all the questions, I must say, in this process so far, but I'm going to stick with the process and finish question time there. So, Ebony, you can sit back and relax a little bit. Kelly, this is going to be really tricky for you, Kelly. Thank you for joining us, and I know it's your day off today, so so thank you for being with us too. So Kelly, you're going to be challenged a little bit by this, but maybe instead of bringing your knowledge of the process into it, it may be also probing and asking questions a little bit too. But, so sorry, Cal, all I'm saying is don't you respond to questions or if something's not right. But yeah, so don't become the quasi case speaker. You can speak and be a consultant, Kelly. So
Jeanette knows me too well, and everyone knows that, obviously.
It's just
she
a
knows
bit
I
awkward.
won't be able to control myself, so I'll keep my hands away from the mute button.
No, you're meant to participate, but don't answer questions. That's what I'm saying. Don't become Ebony and answer questions. So we're down to 5 consultants that Ebony is going to get thousands and thousands of dollars worth of advice from now. So yeah, what this phase is really trying to understand it. And for example, we're 5 people that have listened to Ebony and heard 5 different things. This is our 10 minutes to try and share our understanding of, okay, what has gone on here? How does that relate to what we think best practice might look like? Ebony's posed a few questions, one about, how do we not jump to tools versus stepping through the process. We might have highlighted a few other areas of concern. It's our chance to just spend 10 minutes chewing the fat over that kind of stuff before we come up with what would we recommend moving forward. So my role in this is to try and facilitate that discussion. So yeah, I think maybe we just start out with a bit of a free for all of what's kind of what did we hear and what's our reflections of what was important in what Ebony shared.
I feel like the beginning that when Eb talked about that there were 4 people who'd done the training, that they were the ones who sort of led the process. That I just think is an amazing asset to have in a group like this, because, one of the barriers we talked about before is feeling in our breakout room was feeling a bit alone and not having that support, like you really need a buddy to help you through this. So I think that, that's a key for success to me in this group. I'd like to later understand more about how they were able to bring the rest of the group on board, but I think one of the other assets for that sounds like it was the whole group having some understanding of theory of change in the beginning because they'd already developed one. And if they were the same people who'd already developed the theory theory of change who are then working towards this MEL plan, I expect it wouldn't have been really foreign language for them. So I think that's, that they to me are probably two key enablers of success, maybe.
So Jo, can I probe you a little bit there? Like, can you see any risks in actually having 4 people done the training in a larger group? Can you see any risks or problems? Like,
Yeah,
you've gone, it's an asset, but is there an alternate view?
yeah. If there's only like 2 others or 3 others who just feel like, oh well, you 4 know what you're doing, you can keep it. I'll just sort of come along for the ride. I'm not really part of this. So, yeah, how do they shift that? I suppose Evan, you might have touched on it before, that power things, that they sort of hold the power of this MEL plan. How do they distribute that so it's everybody's business within the group, or everybody who might have a role? So in some ways, 4 might be like the cliquey group that holds the power, and in this too. So yeah, that could be a bit of a challenge.
I was thinking about that as well, thinking to me the risk is not necessarily that group's wielding the power, but that the others are sitting back and going, like you also said, Jo, oh, well, you can just go off and do it. And when there's the other risk Eb mentioned about, how much effort do we put in for how much reward, and there's, issues around capacity, then that needs to be sort of owned by the whole group to work out, not just go, oh, well, those people are really into it, they know what they're doing, they can just do whatever. Like, you want everyone to weigh all those things up and work out, what really needs to be collected, and how much value there is in doing, whether you pick X number of bits of data you're going to collect, or X times 2,
Yeah, cool. So we've got it, that's a good conversation around the bit of the dynamics and whether it's power or dynamics of the working group. And yes, some have got more knowledge, and it's how is that knowledge being shared in a kind of even ownership way. What other reflections?
And even in sort of saying, well, rather than just handing over responsibility for that data collection to that group of 4, saying, well, actually, there's other stuff, that I could see us collecting, maybe, or that we already collect, like sort of problem solving as a group and sort of identifying other opportunities, rather than saying, oh, we'll let that group pick out the best bits of data to collect, rather than saying, well, at a practical level, we don't have that much capacity and we're already collecting this. Maybe we can look at other ways without finding new bits of data to collect.
Yeah.
Look at what we're already collecting that might be.
So Ro, hold that thought, because that is potentially a solution and a piece of advice as well. Yeah, so no, that's good. Did anyone else's, so other kind of things that you wanted to put on the table that you were reflecting about or thinking about, so that we've got a shared understanding?
I just need to note this. I'm finding this personally terribly challenging. It's almost like I know the answers, or I know the conversations we've had to the things I want to ask, and I'm asking the things I almost want to solve the issue. It's a really strange thing for sitting in this position. But I think one of the things that I reflected on when Ebony was talking about it is the fact that you've sort of got 2 staff members that work at PDH that are part of that group of 4, and you've got a wider group of people that you're working with, and it's to inform that internal group. And I guess it's just around, what question am I asking? Are the right players involved? Is the right information flowing through? Have the right contacts channeled across it? Are we potentially siloing the people that are doing the evaluation? And then, as much as it will inform internally, how does that then potentially go in communication to the wider community once you have been informed, or maybe to not the wider community, but maybe to the collaborative organisations to inform them of that direction?
So So that, and in the case study, as we understand it at the moment, Kelly, you're saying that's not really clear from the information.
I think
Ebony's
Ebony
provided.
discussed it as clear, but I think I see you've got a couple of people in one organisation and you're looking at a whole of a sort of community approach, and so therefore have the right players that are involved in that evaluation core to inform all the people involved.
Yeah, and I think from what I recall Ebony saying is, you know, the primary goal of this evaluation is around learning, but perhaps what she didn't clarify for us, or we didn't ask the question, is who is the people that are learning from it? Is it that strategic group or broader organisations or the broader community? And being clear about that we didn't hear that clarity, so that may be an area we can think about too.
I'm just wondering about the decision to focus on the here and now, given that there has been quite a few years in the project. I'm wondering if they've captured in their theory change the learning to date, or how you acknowledge that process so far.
Yeah, and you know, we can't ask Ebony those questions, but I think what you're saying though, Jo, is you know, you're there's 7 years kind of history and whatnot there.
Yeah.
The group's decided to look forward, but are they? Is there a risk in just looking forward without having that contextual base?
Have you somehow captured the learnings and taken them on board? And is there any way of authenticating that, I guess?
Yeah. So potentially the risk is that it's not done that well and it feels like you're starting from scratch again.
Yeah.
Or that other information's not important or something, or it's not captured here. It might just lose its value for the group.
Yeah. Others thoughts on that?
It might also be good to acknowledge that, you know, like to keep some momentum, you have to somehow quantify that a whole lot has already been achieved and that you're building on that, rather than just sort of, you know, saying, let's just draw the line here and start from here and start. And I mean, I know it's hard evaluating stuff that's happened previously if you haven't sort of collected much, but I think there's probably ways to do it. And I think just for people around the table to feel that there is something somewhere that they can reference that acknowledges all of that, all those achievements that have gone before. I think that's a really good point, Jo.
Yeah. No, that is really good. We've got 1 more minute. Was there another theme? I've got 3 themes so far. Was there another theme of reflection that you're going, oh, this is interesting, or we need to discuss that?
I think when Ebony said, are we looking at the tools before the questions, and that was a challenge, or that was something that was annoying, or, you know, they were wondering if that was the right process. And I'm always looking at a methodology before I figure out what I want to do sometimes, so I understand where that's coming from. But I wonder if, you know, this whole process of doing Mel is new anyway, that knowing, does it give you more confidence knowing that there are tools available to collect the data or whatever? So it gives the group more confidence to continue with the evaluation. Do you know what I mean? It seems a bit okay to think, well, you know, this is what we want to measure. Oh, here we've got some tools that might help with that, and that. And we can't measure everything. So why don't we start with where we've got some tools to help us, so we're a bit more confident to figure out how to do the hard stuff. That's just my reflection on that a bit.
So when you're talking about that, Jo, though, so 4 people in that group have those tools, probably knowledge of those tools coming out. And, you know, we've all got different levels of knowledge. Is there any issues perhaps with that too, from what, you know, knowing that difference in the group, do you think about it differently?
Yes and no. I think it might give the whole group confidence knowing that, you know, we're all testing this tool just because these people know that they're here. We've never used them before, so we're going to use them together. So that might even be a bit more of an equaliser. I don't know.
Yeah, cool. Alrighty, I'm going to close that session there now. But actually, we're not going to close. What now we've got is 6 more minutes as consultants to take those kind of themes and actually say, well, you know, formulate our advice. So we're not, Ebony's going to hear the advice as we go along. So we don't actually have to write down, here is our exact advice. But we need to kind of take those reflections and move it into something a bit more concrete, which Ro was doing a great job on. She was wanting to move forward. So the 4 themes that I've noted is really around, you know, the dynamics of the group, really about having 4 trained people and involved in a broader group, and whether there's any advice that we're taking out of those reflections. Clarifying, or the need, we had a whole discussion around, you know, the emphasis is on learning, but do we need to clarify who's needing to learn in that? Like, was that really clear or not? And what does that, how important is that? There was a good conversation around, you know, the forward-looking versus you 7 years in and that retrospective value. And then the last discussion around the tools in particular. So choose, you know, we'll probably need to pick through all 4 of those themes quite quickly, but is there some clear advice around any one of those that we want to kick off with?
I think the dynamics of the group could be one to look at, because, you know, it's a couple of reasons. It's about the whole group, you know, taking on some leadership in this or being involved in it. Otherwise, it just ends up with the same 4 people. So you're not even spreading the learning around the MEL process, but even just spreading the load, because there was some discussion too about capacity, that there's not enough capacity. So I feel like there probably needs to be some strategies deliberately thought about that sort of gives the whole group some ownership or some roles in this.
Yeah. And I think one Ro mentioned earlier, because I wrote it down as you're saying it, Ro, is really that, you know, one example might be a problem the whole group needs to problem solve around for gaps in capacity or data collection or whatever. That can be a whole group problem solving process, not just the 4 that are trained in it, because it is a collaborative issue that needs to be resolved.
Yeah.
So I think we, as a group, were talking a fair bit around how we might go about that retrospective versus forward-looking. Any kind of bits of advice people want to provide there?
No, that's a hard one.
It is. I guess if there was some process of maybe the definitely reflecting on the learnings and the learning that's been done in the theory of change to some degree, but somehow capturing it, and Ebony was talking about the document to support the theory of change, maybe documenting those sort of things there.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other thing I heard, and I think again, Ro, you must have flicked to solution mode as well. I think I heard is that maybe when your plan might be looking forward, but when you're actually implementing the tools, the date may not be only forward. You may actually, when you're implementing the tools, you may have some flexibility about learning. For certain ones, it may work to learn from the past to then learn forward as well, so that there's not, instead of, you know, collecting data, if you bring in, you know, I'm thinking if you bring in a focus group together to talk about, I don't know, there's the changes in the collaborative partnership over time, you know, you may not say just within the last 12 months, you may say within the last 5 years and the last 12 months, for example, might be a way you kind of approach it depending on the tool.
The other thing that is sort of sitting in the back in my head is around who's the audience for dissemination of whatever you're finding through your evaluation, because part of it might be about, you know, relaying information to the community who might actually want to know different stuff than what the stakeholders want to know, but also potential funders or other people that you're trying to get to support the work going forward. So, so there's two things there, is that influences, you know, making sure you do have that retrospective bit of a collection of some data or learnings from what's worked and what you've managed to achieve, as well as, you know, the actual bits of what sort of information, because what we might want to know as people involved in implementing the work might be quite different from what either the community or a funding body or someone else might want to know.
And so, Ro, that hits on our kind of third area of advice, as being very clear around who is actually going to learn from this, and actually involving them in actually those key evaluation kind of questioning stuff as well.
Yeah.
And being very clear about that. We're going to stop that. That's our advice section. We're out of time for that. But I reckon there's at least $20,000 worth of good advice in that for Ebony. But now it's Ebony's turn to actually tell us, reflect on the process, or whether you learnt anything in that, or on some of the content of the advice as well.
I just forked out for a wedding and I can't afford another 20 on your advice, guys. No, thank you. Yeah, that was brilliant. And I think a couple of pieces of gold in there to take back to the working group for sure. Joe, Richie, your point about looking back, I think that has been another challenge, certainly in the back of my head, is, yeah, it's all good to want to look forward, but to some extent, you know, we need to acknowledge what's happened in the past. I think we're just grappling with not putting too much emphasis on that and then not looking forward. So I think that you've just brought that back to the surface and reminded us that it's not one or the other. We need to find the balance, and particularly the strategy of maybe expanding on that backing document to the theory of change a little bit more to incorporate where we've come from is a really good one, and we'll be taking that to the working group and discussing that. So thank you so much. Yeah, the one that Joe Brown put forward around maybe it's not a bad thing to be jumping to tools to build the group's confidence to actually continue with this is probably important as well. Just getting to be able to help everyone, I suppose, see how the process will see itself through. Maybe we actually need to start on that. So that's another thing that we could discuss as a working group. Appreciate that advice. Yeah, and involving everyone in measurement. I think that risk that you put forward, Ro, around, you know, is it a bad thing that the majority, almost, maybe it's 50-50 of the group have participated in the training and the others haven't, moving forward too far without them? You've made me think back about it. I actually think that that's been a strength, and we've done that well in doing enough with the whole group to keep them on the journey, and a little bit online to keep it moving along without them losing interest, kind of thing. I actually think we have struck a good balance there, but that's something that we need to keep on the radar and make sure we keep doing that. Yeah, so thank you. I think you're worth your, maybe not your 20 grand, but a little something. No, that's really good. I look forward to, I'm glad we're recording this, because I think as a working group even we'll have immense benefit in maybe going back and listening to a few of those pieces of advice, and yeah, can't thank you enough for that, so thanks.
Great. And Ebony, so we'll finish that session there. Ebony, thank you very much for putting yourself out there, and acknowledge Kelly was keen to put herself out there and present that case study as well. So thank you for doing that, and hopefully you've got the benefit from that. And thank you for all the consultants for your valuable insights. And, you know, to me, I think it's the power of groupthink when we do some of those things. So that was really good. I'll hand back to Eb to finish, take us to a close.
Yeah, cool. So I guess I really enjoyed that process, but that was me. I got a lot out of it. So keen to hear how others found that process to start off with, and the session today as a whole. So we're going to start with the really very complex evaluation technique. I've got 2 questions that I want to ask you. I know that there's not many of us on the screen, but we all have our cameras on, which is really good. You're going to answer the question that I ask you by putting up a certain amount of fingers. So 5 fingers, I have to think about this, 3 fingers or 1 finger. So the very first question is that the process today was inclusive and allowed me to participate equally. And 5 fingers in that case means, yep, it definitely did. 3 fingers means you're not quite sure, and 1 finger means not at all. So I'll say that again. The process today was inclusive and allowed me to participate equally. Absolutely no offense taken to the people who have written this session, but if we all want to fly up a 5, a 3 or a 1 at the same time, go. Woo, 5 from 5. Brilliant. All right, question 2. I have learned something that will help me with my work. Same measurement scale, so 5 meaning yes, definitely, 3 meaning not sure, and 1 meaning not at all. We go.
Can I go 4?
No, Joe, it's 5, 3 or 1.
Oh, probably 5. Yeah, no, I've learned something.
Yeah, something. Brilliant. All right, thank you. Does anyone want to elaborate on why they gave those particular scores, or just give any other general feedback about the process we've followed? Is it something that you'd be keen to do again and hear from someone else other than, well, different case than myself? Ro, you're on mute.
Yeah, no, I just, to be honest, I was a bit thinking, oh, I haven't, I haven't thought about it a huge amount since the training. Am I going to have anything to contribute? But in actual fact, I found that I did, and I learned a lot as well. So, yeah, that's why I gave a 5.
Thanks, Ro. Does anyone else have any other feedback, good or bad?
I felt a little blind, hence why I sort of handballed it towards you, and I'm super glad because I can't ebonyify how you do it, mate. Like, awesome. And like, so I guess first time I've seen the activity. So I guess now that I've seen it, I can almost understand the benefit because I've gone through the process of that sort of group think from different angles and we've certainly done that in different ways. So I guess for me, knowing a lot about the sea change, it was kind of a challenge because I had to almost pretend to swap hats, for want of a better expression. But I can see in an external situation where I might be just a general third-party consultant type style, where that would be really quite beneficial, but also triggered the fact that I went, we really possibly need to do that actually more as a backbone support team. We're a small team and we speak within each other, but getting that more group thought process at a wider, it's a good tool.
I actually thought it was just going to benefit the case study presenter. I thought that they were going to get the most benefit out of it. And that's probably why I hesitated on the second question, did I learn something about it? Because I think that now that I've even thought for another minute or two, I feel like as a consultant, I've even learned a lot from the group think. And so I think that either role you get a learning. I think in terms of Kelly, you're saying, the person, that there's a bit of pressure on the person presenting. I don't think that is the case. I mean, it was today because we probably haven't done the process before as well. But I think once you got used to a process like this, I was sitting there thinking, oh, I wish I hadn't done my case study, which was pretty much like, I just want help with this. There wasn't really, the case study bit would have been this big, but this is what I want to know about would have been much bigger. I felt like that would have been amazing as well. So, yeah, thanks. I'm glad we had a crack at the process.
Yeah, cool. So it's something that you'd be keen to do again, particularly, well, Jo, you've just said you'd love to share a case. Yeah, great.
Yeah, I wonder though, whether it's just like, there's that process, but there's a lot of other kind of intentional learning processes out there as well. And we've probably all experienced them in different ways and different tools. So I'd be interested to hear from others as well about, how could we actually as a group share our learnings in a more peer kind of way into the future. And so it sounds like we've got, you know, some good tips for trialing, you know, keep doing that kind of process, but I don't see that we need to do that again and again and again, but actually explore other kind of learning tools as well.
Yeah, it'd be really great to put that out to the group, because as I said, there were 4 people that just couldn't make it today, but had every intent and willingness to do so, that are keen to watch the recording. So to get a little bit of input from them as well around, you know, what they've seen work before as well, to, you know, continue this learning together.
And on that, one of the ideas I had, and it's just a random idea, is that this is a group itself that, you know, has an outcome that it's trying to achieve. And, you know, we could actually go through the 4-step process of scoping, well, how would we evaluate the this group, and what is the theory of change that this group's trying to achieve? And therefore then what's your key evaluation plan, and where do you actually collect data? To actually, because I noted when you got your survey responses, it was like the more experience in putting it into practice. And so that was what I think, I thought, you know, I don't know how it would work and if it would work, but that was kind of my prompting to think, well, you know, can we actually model the process and evaluate this kind of coming together and learning together as a way of also learning about the evaluation. But I don't know if it's complex enough. I don't know if it suits that model, but that was just a random thought I had out there as well.
Yeah, and that experiential learning type approach is you know, a common learning approach. You know, do something together and see what we learn from it.
Yeah. No, excellent. I'm aware that there's a few PCP staff members and then Cal, who we obviously work close with. So Jo, do you have interest in coming back together and continuing a bit of group think, and what do you feel that your needs are from your organisation at this point in time, given that, you know, you can see value in the tools, but yeah, looking for some opportunities to implement them?
Yeah, it'd be great to get into an opportunity, and there's one I'm wondering if it might be possible, and that's around promoting collaborative work around a certain area that's quite isolated. Again, but we're in the beginning stages of that, so it'd be great to try it all out after learning it. So yeah.
Brilliant.
But I'd be interested. I enjoyed today's session, and it was good to see it in action. And it started to, because I think the more you see it in action, the more it makes sense. It doesn't, you know, I think it's not as obvious as a theoretical model.
True.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we were hearing, that people really need it. And I suppose in a sense, we have recapped a little bit of content through using a case study within the process that we've gone through today. So hopefully that's somewhat ticked that box. Cool. Brilliant. Thank you. Well, we'll share this recording with those who couldn't come along and get a little bit more feedback, give them a chance to watch it, and then get some feedback from them around, you know, if they thought that this process might be helpful, or what their thoughts are in coming together and how we do that to continue our shared learning. But I think we'll call it there for today. So thank you to everyone for coming along. I think we had 9 online at one point, but obviously, you know, people are busy and they're coming in and out. So it was, thank you for sticking with us, Jo and Cal and Rowan. Yeah, too.
Thanks for all the work, guys. That was really, really great.
Thank you. Thank you, Ed.
See you next time.
Brilliant. We'll talk soon.
See you.
Bye.
Yeah.